The porch steps creaked just the same, but something about them felt heavier this time. I placed my hand on the wooden railing, chipped and faded from years of Indiana winters, and took a breath. The air was brisk. Crisp, really. I could feel it against my skin, but the sound, the usual rustle of leaves or the chirp of crickets, was faint, filtered. That's how most things came to me these days. Muted. Like life was happening through glass. I adjusted the scarf around my neck and forced the corners of my mouth into a smile. My face knew the routine: smile, nod, make eye contact even if you can't hear them. This wasn't just any dinner. It was the annual family gathering. Thanksgiving came early in our house. Supposed to be a celebration. A time to reconnect. For me, it was survival. The door creaked open before I could knock. Grandpa. As always, he tapped my shoulder gently, just enough to not startle me. He gave a soft nod, his eyes kind but clouded with something else. Maybe worry. Maybe just age. I stepped inside. Jacob, my brother, looked up from the couch, beer in hand. "Look who finally made it," he said, his words slurred just enough to hint he'd started drinking early. Bethany, his wife, flashed her perfect white teeth in a smile too wide to be real. "Hey, sweetie!" Mom's voice carried from the kitchen. I couldn't make out the words clearly, but her tone was sugar-sweet, the kind that made your teeth ache. Dad didn't look up from his phone. We all took our places at the table. My spot hadn't changed in years, far end, closest to the kitchen, like I was ready to serve or disappear. The smell of turkey filled the room, but it didn't mask the tension that had already settled in the air like dust. The small jabs began early. Jacob whispered something to Bethany, and they both laughed. I could tell by the way her shoulders bounced. Dad asked me a question with his mouth half covered, then shook his head when I asked him to repeat it. Mom talked over me when I tried to speak, like she always did. Grandpa sat silent, his hands folded. I remembered when I was 10, right after the accident, how I thought if I just tried hard enough, listened better, read more lips, smiled more, they'd treat me the same. They never did. And I never stopped trying. Dinner had barely started when Jacob leaned back in his chair and said, "Remember that time she thought someone said fire and ran out of the church during Easter?" They all laughed. I smiled too, but something in my chest burned. Bethany clapped her hands, "Oh my God, yes." And she yelled, "We're all gonna die." More laughter. I looked at my plate. Jacob wasn't done. He pulled his chin in and mimicked my old voice, exaggerating the way I used to speak when I struggled with pronunciation. "We're all gonna die." The table howled. Bethany joined in, pretending to sign with big, wild hand gestures like she was doing charades. I felt my face twitch, just a little. I kept the smile. Then Grandpa put his fork down. It didn't clink or clatter. It just stopped. The silence that followed was louder than any joke. "Do you think it's funny," he said, his voice calm but cutting, "that she had to learn to survive?" Nobody moved. Jacob looked down. Bethany picked at her nail. Mom blinked too fast. Dad took a sip of his wine. Grandpa looked at me. His eyes were wet, but his face didn't crumble. He stood up slowly, left his napkin folded on the chair, and walked out of the room. He didn't say another word. But he left behind his notepad. I didn't notice it until the dishes were being cleared. I stayed behind, as I always did, washing the plates one by one in the kitchen. It gave me something to do, a reason not to be in the same room. The water was warm, the sponge rough. I barely felt either. The laughter had moved to the living room, softer now, more distant. But I could still hear it. Or at least feel the rhythm of it. I dried my hands on a towel and sat at the small kitchen table. That's when I saw it. Grandpa's notepad. Open, scribbled with names and dates. Some I recognized, birthdays, anniversaries. Others I didn't. One name was underlined twice, Walter Keene. I didn't know who that was. I stared at it like it might reveal something if I just focused hard enough. My mind ran in circles. Was it a relative? A friend? Someone from his war days? Or was it something else entirely? Just then, Grandpa walked back in. No words, no sound. Just him, calm as ever. He picked up the notepad, held it to his chest. Why did you write those names? I asked before I could stop myself. He looked at me, long and slow. Because someone needs to remember the truth. He left again. That time, I didn't follow. I sat there for a while. Not thinking. Not even breathing, it felt like. Just letting those words hang in the air. The truth. What truth? Later, I stepped outside onto the porch. The night had dropped colder. I didn't grab my coat. The wind touched my arms like a warning. I looked out at the quiet neighborhood. The same houses. The same porch light flickering across the street. But something inside me felt different. Something had started. I woke before the sun. My eyes had opened on their own, but the rest of me refused to move. The house was still, so still it felt like it was holding its breath. I lay there staring at the ceiling, Grandpa's words echoing in my mind like they were printed across the drywall. Someone needs to remember the truth. I hadn't slept, not really. I drifted in and out, heart pounding, thoughts colliding. The air carried faint traces of coffee and the musty scent of the old books Grandpa kept stacked in corners no one else touched. I pulled the blanket off, padded to the kitchen, and there it was, waiting under my breakfast plate like a silent dare. My name, in Grandpa's handwriting. Just 5 letters on a yellow envelope. I stood still, fingers hovering over the edge of the paper. Half of me wanted to throw it away. The other half, hungrier than I'd ever been for clarity, tore it open with shaking hands. Inside, a manila folder, marked medical, confidential. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened it. At first, I didn't understand what I was reading. Photocopies of hospital records. My name. My date of birth. But the details didn't match the story I'd grown up with. I ran my finger along a line that said, patient admitted, February 4th, 1997, age 3. I read that line over and over. Procedure recommended. Procedure completed. Doctor's name, Voss. There was a letter. Typed. Formal. Cold. Patient responded within expected parameters. Discharge authorized. Trial concluded, no further enrollment necessary. Trial? There was a consent form. My father's signature. No one else's. No mention of an infection. No mention of antibiotics or ear tubes. Just clinical language and a silent horror that crawled under my skin. I felt myself pulling into pieces. Slowly, like unraveling yarn. My lips moved but no sound came out. I had been part of something I never agreed to, never understood. And they never told me. I remembered how my mother would tense any time someone mentioned hospitals. How my father changed the subject. How Grandpa always looked away. Now I knew why. My fingers found one more page. A consent form, dated and signed by Frank Keene, my father. A single name. No signature from my mother. None from Grandpa. No witnesses. I whispered, they did this to me, but the walls swallowed it whole. Or maybe I just couldn't hear myself say it. I stood too fast, nearly knocking the chair over, and rushed to the front door. The driveway was empty. Grandpa's car was gone. I dialed his number, voicemail. Typed out a text, I read it. I need to know everything. No reply. His garden tools sat perfectly arranged beside the shed. Neatly coiled hose, shears cleaned and hanging in place. He had prepared for this. Anticipated it. I walked up to his porch, heart pounding, and saw a small note pinned to his chair. Folded once. Handwritten. Don't confront them yet. I held the paper like it might burn through my skin. So he knew. He knew I'd want to march in and demand answers, make them look me in the eye. And he told me not to. I didn't know if I felt betrayed or protected. With the folder pressed against my chest, I got in my car and drove with no destination. My hands knew where to go before my mind did. The lake. It was always the lake. I sat on the edge of the dock, water calm, sky overcast. I opened the folder again, like the words might look different here. They didn't. Was it money? Were they paid to let them experiment on me? Was it desperation? Ignorance? Or worse, was it indifference? I remembered Grandpa once telling me, the truth is never gentle, it's just necessary. It sounded wise back then. Now it felt like a curse. I screamed. Nothing came back. Just air and silence. My throat burned, but my ears heard nothing. That was the moment I knew, I didn't trust them anymore. When I pulled into the driveway later that morning, her car was there. I sat for a minute, staring at the door, trying to breathe like a normal person. My fingers tapped the steering wheel. Once. Twice. Then I got out. She was already waiting in the doorway. Arms crossed, mouth tight. Colleen. My mother. Your grandfather told me you'd find it, she said, not even blinking. I stopped short. The folder felt like a stone in my hand. What does that mean? She didn't answer right away. Just looked at me the way people look at stray dogs, like deciding whether to feed them or chase them off. There are things you don't understand about that file, she said finally, her voice lower than I expected. I didn't move. Didn't speak. I just stared. My head spun. Did Grandpa tell her on purpose? Was this some kind of trap? Or was he forcing her to come clean? I couldn't tell if he'd handed me the truth or thrown me into the fire. But one thing was clear. If she's hiding something, I'll make her tell me. Please confirm, shall I begin writing chapter 4? I sat in my apartment, the kind of quiet that settles when a city finally exhales. The walls felt thinner than usual, like they couldn't contain what I was about to feel. The laptop sat open in front of me, email open, the subject line glaring, 2021 Annual Review, Dependent Costs, $24K. I clicked through. Lines of internal chatter. Names I knew too well. My mother's, right there, she still needs full-time care, let's keep that line. Then Quinton. Charity case, right? My hands stopped moving. I read it again. And again. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't out of context. It was clear, direct, and meant to be seen only by them. I wasn't their daughter. I was an entry in a spreadsheet. A cost. A talking point. I closed the laptop slowly, the way you shut a door you know won't ever open the same way again. They didn't protect me. They packaged me. I opened it again. My eyes landed on an attached document, forwarded by mistake, maybe. Or maybe fate had a sick sense of humor. The file was labeled Marlowe Family, Comm Strategy. I clicked it. A PR draft. Bullet points and talking cues. Project M, Marlowe daughter. They didn't even use my name. Frame her story as inspirational. Avoid specifics on medical expenses. Highlight family's role in recovery. Every line read like branding. Like I'd been molded to suit their version of compassion. I took a screenshot. Then another. My heart wasn't racing, it was slow, methodical. I wasn't panicking. I was waking up. Maya Angelou's quote circled in my head, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I had all the evidence now. And they'd handed it to me. My phone buzzed. Quentin. I stared at the screen before answering. You know I saw it, right? His voice was low. You shouldn't be in those files. I didn't respond. He exhaled, heavy. This goes deeper than you think. If you go public, they'll destroy you. That word. Destroy. He wasn't threatening me. He was warning me. But it was too late. He sounded like someone trying to put a lid back on a boiling pot, too little, too late. Then let them try, I said. I hung up and hit record on my camera. I was never a footnote, I said. I was your daughter. No edits. No filters. Just me and the truth. I posted the video with the memo blurred in the background. Then I turned off my phone and waited. The next morning, I woke up to noise. Not outside, inside my phone. Messages, tags, alerts, emails. Some familiar names. Most weren't. Some comments were sharp, this is private. She's lying. Who does she think she is? But buried between them were voices I didn't expect. I lived through this too. Thank you for naming it. You're not alone. Those ones I read them twice. My resolve hardened. I texted Dario, find the trust account ledgers. We're going live in 48 hours. He replied with a thumbs up and a single line, they're not ready for this. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what I was about to do. I set up the camera. Put the memo on a screen behind me. Opened the live stream room. The title, Marlowe Family Trust Exposé, A Daughter's Truth. Viewers trickled in slowly. Then faster. I sat down. Looked directly into the camera. For years I stayed quiet, I began. Because I thought silence kept the peace. But the truth deserves its moment. The comments lit up. People watching. Waiting. Then a notification slid across the screen. Colleen Marlowe is now live. My mother. I didn't flinch. Not this time. Just as I opened my mouth to continue, the lights in my apartment flickered. Once. Then again. A low hum from the fuse box sputtered. The fridge stopped. Silence. I didn't look away from the camera. They're cutting me off, I said. But they can't stop what's already in motion. The screen went black. Stepping into the lobby of the gala, the chandeliers hung like Judgment Day. The skyline outside glowed with silver towers, but inside I felt a cold cloak wrap around me. They greeted me with smiles. "Honored guest," they said, yet the air between applause and champagne held a secret I recognized all too well. I tucked the folder under my arm, fingers tight around its edge. My sister Celestine entered minutes later, welcomed with handshakes and lights focused on her. I stood to the side, a silent shadow. The quote from Audre Lorde swirled, "Your silence will not protect you." My breath came fast. Tonight I faced their stage, under a spotlight I never asked for. The announcement came, and the visionary behind this hearing support initiative is Celestine Marlowe. My world froze. On the screen behind her hung a photograph of me at work, my sign language module, my recruiting notes, but the name flashing was hers. The room erupted in applause. I forced my hands to clap. I remembered the months I spent on that project, late nights drafting grant proposals, coordinating volunteers, translating manuals from English into ASL. I asked someone quietly, "Why isn't my name there?" They looked away. "They say you preferred to stay behind the scenes." Rage flared inside me, laced with sorrow. I nodded without sound. My work had been handed off like a discarded piece of property. My sister accepted a trophy built on my labor. Later, in the quiet of my hotel room, I cracked open my phone. My feed was flooded. A major blog had posted a story, with the headline, "Marlowe heir turns philanthropist, daughter sounds off?" Under it, my face and a caption, "Thanks to family fortune, she talks loud now." Comments raged, "She wants attention. She only got that job through her name." One hit harder, "Still can't hear properly, so she created sign language training?" How convenient. My throat tightened. The narrative I helped build was now being used to take me down. I grabbed Grandpa's file again, remembering another quote, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." I swore I would make it mine. Isolation wrapped around me that night. I stepped onto the balcony, the city spread like a map of things I once thought I owned. The phone rang, an unknown number. I didn't pick it. I thought of the years I'd lived under their charity image. Of dinners where I sat quiet, their pride hiding the price. The first time I sat in therapy, I remember the counselor saying, "Being invisible doesn't protect you." I felt that fully now. A passing hotel guest offered help. "You okay, Ms. Marlowe?" I smiled, thin and tight. Inside I pledged, I will not let them tell me who I am anymore. Back in my room, I pulled the folder from under the pillow. The documents inside were alive, burning. I locked the door. Switched off lights. Sat at the desk, the screen's glow my only witness. I typed a message to Grandpa, "They've begun rewriting history. I need the ledger you promised." My heart froze when a red icon blinked, "Remote access attempt." My laptop was being watched. I whispered to the darkness, "If they think I'm done, they don't know how I begin." I left a voice message, "Watch your name in the public ledger or watch my story unfold." The screen faded to black. The car idled just long enough for the chill to settle in. It was barely dawn, the sky still thinking about turning blue. My suitcase sat in the back, zipped tight like it had something to say. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror, pale, drawn, but holding. Overnight, the story grew teeth. Notifications kept popping in like pebbles hitting a windshield. She only came home for the inheritance. I didn't flinch. Not anymore. Then Lindsay's message, "Your family's version seems real." I don't know what to think. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. I remembered Mandela's words, bravery isn't about not being afraid. It's doing what's right even while fear breathes down your neck. I backed out of the driveway and pointed the car north, back to Indiana. Back to the place that raised me in silence. The sun climbed slowly as I merged onto the freeway, and my name was climbing with it, up hashtags, onto blogs, through group chats. Headlines screamed what my family wanted out there, entitled "Daughter Returns for Her Cut." I scrolled through comment threads. She's after the money, plain and simple. Bet she's been planning this since her dad passed. People who'd never met me decided I was greedy, spoiled. A memory came like a slap, Celestine's face on that gala screen, smiling like she built the thing with her own hands. My hands. My late nights. My name, wiped clean. I tightened my hold on the wheel. Let them say what they want. I wasn't here to explain anymore. I was here to show. The phone rang. Lindsay. I let it ring once. Twice. Then answered. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. I saw the stories. You okay? I didn't respond right away. I could feel my heart not trusting her. She'd been with me when I learned ASL. Held my hand when I couldn't hear the nurse call my name. But now? Now she hesitated. I don't know what to believe, she said finally. I mean, your sister's version is everywhere. I swallowed hard. A real friend asks questions. Doesn't assume. She hesitated. I just can't risk being seen siding with you. Not publicly. I ended the call. No yelling. Just a slow, final touch on the screen. I stared ahead at the road, letting the silence settle in my chest. Sometimes, you don't need enemies when silence from a friend cuts deeper. I wiped my face dry without looking down. No more waiting on loyalty. No more hoping for rescue. I had myself, and that would be enough. As I turned off the interstate, the estate gates appeared like old ghosts. Same crunch of gravel. Same heavy oaks lining the drive like judges. I parked. Got out. Each step up the path sounded louder than it should have. Celestine stood there waiting, legs crossed, iced coffee in hand like she was lounging on a magazine shoot. She smiled, just enough to make me remember every lie tucked behind those teeth. Well. Look who finally came home. I kept my face steady. Thanks. You've really made it easy to remember what home feels like. The gate clanged shut behind me, louder than I remembered. I didn't turn to look. This time, I didn't plan to run. Inside the study, the air was still. I reached into my bag and pulled out Grandpa's USB, black, scratched, labeled in his messy scrawl. I sat at the old oak desk and stared at the slot. Slid it in. Files appeared, dozens. One folder stood out, Trust Moves _20042018. I opened it. Numbers. Names. Transfers. Schedules. Everything they'd hidden under handshakes and fancy suits. The kind of paper trail no one expects the quiet one to keep. Then the light on my laptop blinked. Red. Not a notification, recording. Someone was watching. I didn't move. I whispered to myself, not for drama, but as a promise, you're watching now. Tomorrow, it'll be your turn to listen. The car idled just long enough for the chill to settle in. It was barely dawn, the sky still thinking about turning blue. My suitcase sat in the back, zipped tight like it had something to say. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror, pale, drawn, but holding. Overnight, the story grew teeth. Notifications kept popping in like pebbles hitting a windshield. She only came home for the inheritance. I didn't flinch. Not anymore. Then Lindsay's message, your family's version seems real. I don't know what to think. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. I remembered Mandela's words, bravery isn't about not being afraid. It's doing what's right even while fear breathes down your neck. I backed out of the driveway and pointed the car north, back to Indiana. Back to the place that raised me in silence. The sun climbed slowly as I merged onto the freeway, and my name was climbing with it, up hashtags, onto blogs, through group chats. Headlines screamed what my family wanted out there, entitled Daughter Returns for Her Cut. I scrolled through comment threads. She's after the money, plain and simple. Bet she's been planning this since her dad passed. People who'd never met me decided I was greedy, spoiled. A memory came like a slap, Celestine's face on that gala screen, smiling like she'd built the thing with her own hands. My hands. My late nights. My name, wiped clean. I tightened my hold on the wheel. Let them say what they want. I wasn't here to explain anymore. I was here to show. The phone rang. Lindsay. I let it ring once. Twice. Then answered. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. I saw the stories. You okay? I didn't respond right away. I could feel my heart not trusting her. She'd been with me when I learned ASL. Held my hand when I couldn't hear the nurse call my name. But now? Now she hesitated. I don't know what to believe, she said finally. I mean, your sister's version is everywhere. I swallowed hard. A real friend asks questions. Doesn't assume. She hesitated. I just can't risk being seen siding with you. Not publicly. I ended the call. No yelling. Just a slow, final touch on the screen. I stared ahead at the road, letting the silence settle in my chest. Sometimes, you don't need enemies when silence from a friend cuts deeper. I wiped my face dry without looking down. No more waiting on loyalty. No more hoping for rescue. I had myself, and that would be enough. As I turned off the interstate, the estate gates appeared like old ghosts. Same crunch of gravel. Same heavy oaks lining the drive like judges. I parked. Got out. Each step up the path sounded louder than it should have. Celestine stood there waiting, legs crossed, iced coffee in hand like she was lounging on a magazine shoot. She smiled, just enough to make me remember every lie tucked behind those teeth. Well. Look who finally came home. I kept my face steady. Thanks. You've really made it easy to remember what home feels like. The gate clanged shut behind me, louder than I remembered. I didn't turn to look. This time, I didn't plan to run. Inside the study, the air was still. I reached into my bag and pulled out Grandpa's USB, black, scratched, labeled in his messy scrawl. I sat at the old oak desk and stared at the slot. Slid it in. Files appeared, dozens. One folder stood out, Trust Moves _20042018. I opened it. Numbers. Names. Transfers. Schedules. Everything they'd hidden under handshakes and fancy suits. The kind of paper trail no one expects the quiet one to keep. Then the light on my laptop blinked. Red. Not a notification, recording. Someone was watching. I didn't move. I whispered to myself, not for drama, but as a promise, you're watching now. Tomorrow, it'll be your turn to listen. The wheels crunched slowly under the weight of midnight silence as I parked beneath a flickering street lamp. The rusted sign above the old entryway read Marlowe Research 200420012, crooked and coated in grime. The building stood like a mausoleum for secrets no one wanted to exhume. I sat still for a moment. The USB in my pocket pressed against my leg like it had a heartbeat. Grandpa's note in my other hand, meet me where we left it all. I stepped out. Damp air mixed with a faint chemical smell that hadn't left this place. The wind caught my coat as I approached the shattered glass doors. Somewhere inside, the ghosts of a version of me I didn't choose still wandered these halls. I remembered Douglas's words, power concedes nothing without a demand. I took a breath and stepped in. The overhead lights snapped on. I wasn't alone. My feet moved without asking. Down narrow stairs I hadn't seen in years, the metal banister slick with dust and memory. The corridor echoed my steps, sharp, precise. At the end, a door marked records, authorized access only. I pushed it open and there they were. Father stood at the desk, hands behind his back. Celestine leaned against a filing cabinet, casual as ever, sipping something from a bottle wrapped in tissue. You brought this all out, Father said. You're risking everything. Celestine didn't wait. You always were loud for someone who can't hear. I stepped forward. Calm now. Sharpened by every insult they thought would break me. I placed the USB on the desk. This doesn't need a microphone. It'll speak on its own. No theatrics. No raised voices. I reached into my coat pocket and opened my phone. Grandpa's face filled the screen. His voice trembled, but the conviction was steel. I kept the ledger because truth matters more than comfort. The video played on. Page after page, scanned files, handwritten notes, receipts, even hospital intake forms labeled falsified diagnosis. Celestine froze. Her hand slowly lowered the bottle. Father turned away for just a second, covering his mouth like it might stop the air from changing. I held up the leather-bound ledger. You used my hearing loss. Turned it into funding. Built fake outreach campaigns. You rewrote my entire childhood like it was part of a sales pitch. The room felt like it shrank. Cold crept up from the floor tiles. I kept speaking. You taught me silence meant survival. Tonight, it means strategy. From down the corridor, footsteps. Quick. Purposeful. They had backup. I shoved the ledger back into my bag and ran. The alarms kicked in as if the hospital had come alive. A siren echoed through the walls, sharp, blaring. I took off through the halls. My shoes slid on the cracked linoleum. I heard shouting behind me. I passed the pediatric wing. That door. That room. I remembered the ice of the exam table, the sharp click of equipment I couldn't see but could feel. I ran faster. Carts crashed behind me. Someone yelled my name. I didn't look back. I shoved through a service exit. Rain pelted my face. The parking lot was slick, the world shining under the orange streetlights. I dove into the car and slammed the door. Hands shaking, I started the engine. Tires squealed on wet pavement. I didn't stop driving until the road was empty behind me. Dawn crept up slow and quiet. Each raindrop on the windshield felt like applause from a silent crowd. I looked in the mirror and saw someone else, still me, but no longer erased. I opened my inbox, pulled up the message draft. Attached every file. Typed to the reporter who'd asked, again and again, "Do you have proof?" I hit send. "You wanted truth? Here's the full subscription." I took one deep breath, then another. I wasn't running anymore. I was rebuilding. From ashes, yes, but with truth as the blueprint. The morning air still clung to my skin when I pulled off the highway, tires crunching against gravel outside the old cabin Grandpa once used for his writing retreats. I hadn't been back here in decades, not since the day he showed me how to read lips by the light of a fireplace and said, "Your voice doesn't have to be loud to be heard." I parked, engine ticking in the silence, and sat for a moment. My hands rested on the folder, still warm from the glove box. The one that held the final copy of the ledger, the notarized statement Grandpa recorded before his health failed. This time, there would be no live stream. No public broadcast. Just me. Choosing what to carry forward, and what to finally put down. Inside the cabin, dust floated like ash. I placed the file on the table beside a stack of old journals. My phone buzzed. A message from an editor I trusted. "The story runs Monday. You sure you want to stay anonymous?" I typed one word back, "Yes." The truth didn't need my name. It just needed to exist. I lit the fireplace. The same one Grandpa sat in front of while explaining how Marlowe Trust paid off inspectors, silenced whistleblowers, and used my hearing loss as a marketing tool to boost compassion funding. There was a moment I thought he might cry when he said, "They made you a symbol before they made you a person." He never wanted revenge. Just clarity. I sifted through the ledger pages one last time. Bank statements. Coded entries. Memos signed by Father, approved by the board, Celestine's initials on several. She would survive this. They all would, in some form. But not untouched. I stepped outside as the wind shifted. Autumn leaves clattered against the deck like applause from ghosts. The final item I held was a photo, me and Grandpa, heads together at some long-forgotten barbecue, grease on our hands, laughing. That photo wasn't part of the evidence. It was part of my keeping. By mid-afternoon, I drove to a public drop box. Slipped the sealed envelope addressed to the IRS inside. Walked away without looking back. Let the system chew on it. Let the ones who watched me shrink now watch me vanish on my own terms. Back at the estate, I packed quietly. My room was just as I'd left it, intact, sterile, like no one expected me to stay. I didn't see Father. Celestine was at a board meeting in Chicago. The silence I left behind didn't feel bitter anymore. It felt chosen. Lindsay texted a simple "I was wrong." I didn't reply. Not out of malice. Out of self-preservation. Before leaving, I walked past the dining room where all the deals were whispered under breath in champagne flutes. I paused, just for a second. Then, out loud, I said, "You lost more than you ever knew you had." No one was there to hear it. And that was fine. At the airport, the woman at security smiled politely when she saw my hearing aid. Traveling far? I smiled. Far enough to start again. She nodded. Well, safe journey, ma'am. I whispered, mostly to myself, "It already is." As the plane lifted off, I looked down one last time at the town that raised me, erased me, and tried to rewrite me. Let them write whatever they want now. The final draft? That's mine.